I have to tell you something, and it is not easy to say. For a long time I was wrong about the law of assumption. I taught it the way almost everyone teaches it. I told people to want it badly enough, to visualize harder, to repeat the affirmations until they believe them, to raise their vibration and wait for the universe to deliver. And I watched sincere people do all of that with everything they had and stay broke. Not because they were lazy, not because they did not believe. They were doing exactly what they were told, and it was keeping them exactly where they were. So I went back and I studied the people who actually had money, the ones for whom wealth was not a struggle, but a climate they lived in. And what I found embarrassed me, because they were not doing the things I had been teaching. In many cases, they were doing the opposite. There are about 7 mental moves that genuinely wealthy people make, almost without thinking, and the average person makes the exact reverse of every single one. And that reverse, that mirror image, is what keeps you broke. So forget everything you think you know for the next half hour. I'm going to walk you through all 7, and somewhere in here you are going to recognize yourself, and that recognition is the beginning of the whole thing changing. The first move is the one that breaks everyone, so we start here. Wealthy people assume from the end. The broke person works toward the end. That sounds like a small difference, and it is actually the entire difference. When you work towards something, you have placed it in the future in front of you at a distance, and you are walking and never arriving, because the assumption underneath the walking is, I do not have this yet, and the law faithfully keeps that true. The wealthy person does not walk toward the money. He starts from inside the having of it. He assumes it as a finished fact and lives from there. Picture 2 people who both want a full house. One stands outside in the cold, looking through the window at the warmth, wanting it, working toward it, promising himself that one day he will be inside. The other simply walks in, sits down by the fire, and acts like a man who lives there because in his mind he already does. The law does not reward the longing of the man at the window. It matches the state of the man at the fire. You have been standing at the window your whole life, calling it ambition, calling it hustle, and the wanting itself has been the wall. The move is to stop trying to get in and start assuming you already live there. Now watch how this exposes what you have been doing. Every time you say, I am working on my money, I am building toward financial freedom, I am on my way, you feel productive, you feel responsible, and you are quietly reinforcing the assumption that you are not there. On my way is a state of absence. The rich do not feel on their way. They feel arrived even when the numbers are still moving, because the identity arrived first and the numbers are just catching up. So the first correction is brutal and simple. You stop living on your way and you start living from the end. You decide the thing is done and you carry yourself through today as a person for whom it is already handled, not arrogantly, quietly, with the boredom of someone who stopped wondering a long time ago. The second move is about that exact boredom, because it is the second thing the rich do that the broke person cannot do. Wealthy people are calm about money, almost numb. The broke person is emotional about money, and that emotion is broadcasting lack on every frequency. Here is the part nobody tells you. Excitement is a symptom of not having. Think about it honestly. You only get that electric, hopeful, almost desperate excitement about money when, deep down, you believe you do not have it, and you are hoping it will come. The man who genuinely has it does not get excited about $1,000. He does not get excited about 10,000. It does not move his needle because it matches what he already is. So when you sit down to imagine your wealthy life and you feel that rush, that craving, that please let this work, you have just told the law the truth of your state, which is I am the one who lacks this and desperately wants it. And the law gives you more of the wanting, because wanting is what you broadcast. The wealthy move is to deflate the excitement down into calm certainty, to imagine the money and feel almost nothing, the way you feel almost nothing about the water coming out of your tap. It is just there, it is handled. That flat, unbothered, slightly bored certainty is the actual feeling of wealth, and it is the opposite of the high vibration frenzy you were taught to chase. The third move is the one this channel comes back to again and again, because it is the spine of everything. Wealthy people ignore the evidence. The broke person obeys it. Your whole day is organized around consulting the 3D for permission to feel a certain way. You check the balance and let the number set your mood. You look at the bills and let them tell you who you are. You scan your bank app the way a frightened person checks a wound, again and again, and every check is an act of worship. You are kneeling to the evidence and asking it, please tell me what is true. And the evidence, which is nothing but a printout of your past assumptions, tells you the same broke story it told you yesterday, and you accept it as the verdict on your future. The wealthy person does not do this. He has a strange relationship with the facts. He sees the low number, and it simply does not have the authority to change his state, because he has decided that his assumption outranks the evidence. He treats the current condition as old news, a temporary reading that has not caught up to who he now is. This is what people miss when I say ignore the 3D. I do not mean be reckless. I mean strip the evidence of its power to write your inner state. You can look at a number and refuse to let it become your identity. That refusal is wealth behavior. The kneeling is poverty behavior. And almost everyone is on their knees without knowing it. Before I give you the fourth move, which is where this stops being theory and starts being a decision you make, I want you to do one small thing, because it is going to matter for what comes next. If you have already caught yourself in one of these first three, if you felt that little sting of recognition, go to the pinned comment and write which one caught you. Just the number. 1, 2, or 3. That is not for me. That is you marking the exact place where the old pattern lives, and naming it is how you start to loosen its grip. Write the number, and then stay with me, because the fourth move is the one that separates the people who talk about this law from the people who actually live it. The fourth move is about command. Wealthy people decide. The broke person asks. This is maybe the most important psychological shift in the entire teaching, so slow down here. When you want money, what is your inner posture toward it? Be honest. For most people, it is a posture of petition. Please, I hope, if I am good enough, if the timing is right, if the universe is willing. You are approaching wealth like a beggar approaching a king, hat in hand, hoping to be granted a coin. And the law reads your posture perfectly. It sees a petitioner, so it keeps you in the role of one who has to ask, forever asking, occasionally granted a little, never owning the throne. The wealthy person does not ask for his financial reality. He decides it. He does not hope the money comes. He assumes the matter is settled and moves on, with the unbothered authority of a man giving an instruction rather than making a request. This is the difference between do not ask and dictate, between begging the universe and informing it, and it offends people because they were taught that wanting money is greedy and that you should be humble and grateful and hope. But humility toward your own creative power is not a virtue, it is a malfunction. You were given the power to assume, which is the power to decide what is true for you, and you have been using it to beg. The fourth move is to stop asking the universe for money like a subject and start assuming it like a sovereign. The crown was always yours. You just kept handing it back. These first four moves share a single root, and I want to name it before we go on. Assume from the end instead of working toward it. Stay calm instead of excited. Ignore the evidence instead of obeying it. Decide instead of ask. Underneath all four is one posture. The wealthy person treats his desired reality as already true, and himself as the authority over his own state, while the broke person treats his desired reality as distant and himself as a petitioner waiting on external permission. Everything else is detail. If you only took these four and lived them, your financial life would begin to bend, because you would have stopped feeding the assumption of lack with your every thought and habit. But there are three more, and the next three are where the real failure usually hides, because they are the ones that operate when no one is watching, in the privacy of your own inner voice. So let us go there, into the part of you that talks all day long and has been quietly keeping you exactly where you are. The fifth move lives in your inner conversation. Wealthy people guard what they say to themselves. The broke person lets the inner voice run wild, and it runs straight into lack every time. All day, under everything you do, there is a stream of talk inside your head, and it never stops. For the person who struggles with money, that stream is almost entirely about not having. I cannot afford that. That is too expensive. I should not. What if I run out? How will I cover this? Why does everyone else have it easier? That inner conversation is not describing your life. It is creating it. It is the assumption of lack, broadcasting itself in words, thousands of times a day, with total conviction. And here is what makes it deadly. You do not even hear it anymore. It has become the background hum of your mind, so constant that it feels like reality itself rather than a choice. The wealthy person has a different inner conversation, and most of the time he is not even aware of how different it is. When he sees something expensive, the broke voice says, "I cannot afford that," and the wealthy voice does not even form that sentence. It thinks that is easily handled, or it simply feels no resistance at all and moves on. Same object, two completely opposite inner responses, producing two completely opposite lives. The fifth move is to start catching the inner conversation and refusing to let the broke voice narrate your day. You do not chant a fake affirmation over it. You let the wealthy self respond naturally the way it actually would until that response becomes the new default and the old narration falls silent from neglect. I want to be precise about how this works because the inner conversation is where people either win or lose this whole thing, and they usually do not even know the battle is happening. Neville said that to change the circumstances of your life, you must change your inner talking, and that the inner conversations of one moment become the audible arguments of the next. In plain terms, the way you talk to yourself today is writing the script that your life reads back to you tomorrow. So you have to become a kind of guardian at the door of your own mind, not tense, not white-knuckled, but watchful. When you catch the lack voice, you do not panic and you do not scold yourself. You simply notice it, the way you would notice a draft in the room, and you let the other voice speak, the one that already has it. Over weeks, this changes the entire weather of your mind, and because your world is your mind pushed out, the weather of your circumstances changes to match. People look for the magic in some special technique, some ritual, some perfect visualization. The magic was always in the boring, constant, unglamorous work of what you allow yourself to say to yourself when no one is listening. The sixth move is the one that quietly tortures the broke person to death, and the wealthy person never touches it at all. It is the question, how? Wealthy people do not need to know how. The broke person cannot let go of how, and the gripping is strangling the very thing he wants. Watch what happens in your mind the moment you try to assume a large sum of money. Almost instantly, a voice jumps in and demands, "But how? Where would it even come from? What is the plan? What is the mechanism?" And the moment you engage that question, you have left the state of having and walked back into the state of figuring out, which is a state of not having. The demand for how is a disguised confession that you do not believe it is done, because a man who knows a thing is finished does not interrogate the root. The wealthy person assumes the end and leaves the how completely alone, not because he is careless, but because he understands the how is not his department. The subconscious, the deeper intelligence, the law itself, builds the bridge of incidents that carries the assumption into form, and it does so through routes you could never have planned and would not believe if I described them. Your job is the what and the who. What life? Who you are now. The how belongs to the power you are assuming with, and it is infinitely better at engineering it than your anxious planning mind. The sixth move is to release the how, to assume the end and let the means take care of themselves, the way you trust the floor to be there when you take a step, without first calculating the physics of it. Now we have reached the seventh move, and it is the one that decides whether any of the other six survive contact with reality. Because here is what is going to happen. You are going to make these moves. You are going to assume from the end, stay calm, ignore the evidence, decide instead of ask, guard your inner talk, release the how, and then reality is going to test you. It always does. A bill will come. A number will drop. Someone will say the wrong thing. And in that moment, the seventh move is everything. Wealthy people stay unmoved when reality tests them. The broke person collapses the instant the test arrives, and the collapse cancels everything he built. Picture it. You spend a week assuming wealth, feeling it, sleeping in it. Then an unexpected expense lands, and your stomach drops, and that old familiar voice says, "See, nothing has changed. This is the real world. Who are you kidding?" And the moment you agree with that voice, the moment you let the drop in your stomach become your identity again, you have handed the throne back to the broke self and told the law to continue exactly as before. The wealthy person feels the same event and does not move. Not because he is rich and can afford it, but because his state does not take orders from a single event. He has decided who he is, and one bill is not allowed to renegotiate that decision. The seventh move is to treat every test as exactly that, a test, a question the 3D is asking about who you really are now, and to answer it not with collapse but with a quiet, almost boring steadiness that says, "This changes nothing, I have already moved." Let me make the seventh move usable, because it is the hardest and the most important. The test is not your enemy. The test is the exam at the end of the lesson, and you have been failing it your whole life without realizing it was an exam. When the unwanted thing appears, there is a gap, a second or two, between the event and your reaction. In that gap lives all your power. The old self wants to rush in and react the way it always has, with fear, with that sinking collapse. Your work is to catch the gap and choose the reaction of the wealthy self instead, not a fake reaction, a deliberate one. The man with millions sees the bill and feels nothing because it does not threaten his identity, so you practice feeling nothing. You let the bill be a number that gets handled, and you refuse to let it pull you back into the old state. Every single time you do this, you starve the broke assumption of the emotional food it needs to survive, and you feed the wealthy one. Do it enough times, and something remarkable happens. The bad news stops being able to move you, not because you forced calm, but because the new state has become genuinely who you are, and a man does not panic at evidence that contradicts a fact he is certain of. That certainty, untouched by the test, is the final move, and it is the one that locks all the others into place. So there they are, all seven, and I want you to hold them as one picture before I send you out to live them. Assume from the end instead of working toward it. Stay calm instead of excited. Ignore the evidence instead of obeying it. Decide instead of ask. Guard your inner conversation instead of letting it run into lack. Release the how instead of strangling the wish with it. And stay unmoved when reality tests you instead of collapsing. Now look at the broke version of yourself, the one you walked in here as. He works toward it and never arrives. He gets excited and broadcasts lack. He obeys the evidence and kneels to his own past. He asks and begs and hopes. He lets his inner voice narrate poverty all day. He strangles every wish by demanding to know how, and he collapses the moment reality pushes back. That is not a character flaw. That is simply 7 habits running in reverse, and habits can be reversed. Every one of these moves is available to you right now for free, in the privacy of your own mind, with no money required to begin, which is the cruel joke of it. Wealth behavior costs nothing. You have just been spending your mental life on the poverty version without knowing there was a choice. I want to take the deepest of these and go one layer further, because if you understand this layer, the other 6 become almost automatic. Underneath all 7 moves is a single thing the wealthy do that the broke person does not, and it is this. They give more reality to their assumption than to their circumstances. That is the whole secret hiding underneath the list. The broke person grants total reality to his circumstances and treats his assumption as a fragile little hope that the circumstances are constantly allowed to crush. The wealthy person flips it. His assumption is the solid, real, unshakable thing, and the circumstances are the temporary, shifting, soon-to-be-updated thing. When you truly make your inner state more real to yourself than the outer condition, all 7 moves stop being effort and start being natural, because you are simply behaving in accordance with what you have decided is most real. The man who knows deep down that his assumption is more real than his bank balance does not need to be reminded to stay calm, to ignore the evidence, to release the how. He does it the way you breathe. So if you take one thing from these 7, take this. Practice making your imagined reality way more than your physical evidence, until the evidence is the thing that feels temporary, and the assumption is the thing that feels like home. Let me also kill the objection that is rising in some of you right now, the one that says, this is just pretending, this is denial, this is refusing to face reality. No. Facing reality and being enslaved by it are not the same thing. You can see the low balance with perfect clarity and still refuse to let it dictate who you are becoming. The wealthy person is not in denial about his current numbers. He sees them. He just does not worship them. There is a vast difference between acknowledging a fact and surrendering your identity to it. The broke person cannot tell those two apart, so he thinks that to be realistic, he must feel poor, and to feel anything else would be lying. But the rich man proves daily that you can hold an accurate picture of the present while living from a different assumption about who you are, and that the assumption is what eventually rewrites the picture. Realism is fine. Realism as a prison is the disease. You are allowed to see clearly and assume boldly at the same time. In fact, that combination, clear eyes and an unmoved assumption, is exactly what the seventh move requires. And here is the part that should land on you with some weight. These 7 moves are not a trick to get money. They are a description of an identity. You do not perform them once and collect a prize. You become the kind of person who lives this way, and the money is the natural climate that person lives in. This is why the people who chase the law as a technique always fail, and the people who let it reshape who they are succeed. You were looking for a method, and what you actually need is a transformation. The method was never going to work on top of a broke identity, because the identity would override it every time, the way these people repeated affirmations all day and stayed exactly as poor as the self that was repeating them. Change the self, and the affirmations become unnecessary, because the new self does not need to convince itself of what it already is. That is the whole arc of this teaching. Stop trying to do wealth from a broke identity and start being the wealthy identity, from which the right doing flows without strain. So here is what I am asking you to actually do, starting today, because a teaching you do not use is just entertainment. Pick the one move out of the 7 where you felt the sharpest recognition, the one that exposed you most, and work only on that one this week. Do not try to fix all 7 at once. Take the single move that stung, and catch yourself every time you do the broke version of it, and deliberately choose the wealthy version instead. If it was the inner conversation, guard your inner talk this week. If it was the how, release the how every time it grips you. If it was collapsing at bad news, practice staying unmoved when the test comes. One move, lived deliberately for a week, will do more than understanding all 7 and applying none. And as that one move becomes natural, the others start to follow, because they all share the same root and the same posture, and pulling one into place gently pulls the rest. I want to answer a question that is sitting in some of you, because the title itself provokes it. How can these be moves rich people make that keep you broke? They sound like things the rich do for themselves. Here is the answer, and it is uncomfortable. The rich are not keeping you broke on purpose. They do not have to. You keep yourself broke by making the exact reverse of every move they make, and the contrast is so total that their wealth and your lack are produced by the same 7 decisions pointed in opposite directions. Every time a wealthy person assumes from the end, somewhere a broke person works toward it and stays at the window. Every time a wealthy person stays calm, a broke person gets excited and broadcasts his lack. It is not a conspiracy. It is a mirror. The moves that build their wealth are the precise moves that reversed build your poverty, which means the prison and the key are the same 7 things. That should not depress you. It should free you, because it means you do not have to wait for anyone to let you out. You were never locked in by them. You were locked in by the reversed version of moves that cost nothing to flip. Now, here is something most people never consider, and it explains why wealth seems to run in families and poverty seems to run in families, and why neither is really about money at all. The people who grow up around wealth do not learn these 7 moves from a book. They absorb them from the air. They grow up hearing the calm, inner conversation spoken out loud at the dinner table. They watch the adults around them stay unmoved when a bill comes, treat money as already handled, decide rather than beg, never strangle a plan by demanding to know how it will all work. The child soaks up the assumption the way he soaks up a language, and he becomes wealthy on the inside decades before he has a dollar of his own, so that when money comes, it simply matches the self that was already built. And the child who grows up around lack absorbs the opposite with the same innocence. He hears, "I cannot afford that," 1,000 times. He watches the adults collapse at every test, kneel to every number, beg and hope and work toward and never arrive. He learns the broke moves as his native tongue, and he carries that assumption into adulthood, and money avoids him not because he is unworthy, but because he is fluent in lack. None of this is destiny. The reason this teaching exists is that you can learn the wealthy moves on purpose as an adult, the way an adult learns a second language. It is slower than absorbing it as a child, and it takes deliberate practice where the wealthy child got it for free. But the end state is identical. You can become a native speaker of wealth. You just have to study the grammar the rich never had to study because they were born hearing it. Let me take you through a single ordinary day and show you the 7 moves in action, so this stops being a list and becomes a way of living. You wake up. The first move is already there, waiting. The broke self reaches for the phone to check the balance, to kneel to the evidence before his feet even hit the floor. You do not. You wake as a person for whom money is handled, and you let your first inner state be the calm of the already done, not the anxiety of the report. You go through your morning, and an expense comes up, and your stomach moves to drop, the old collapse rising. You catch the gap and you stay unmoved, and the bill becomes a number that gets handled rather than a verdict on your worth. Midday, you see something you want and cannot, by current appearances easily buy. The broke voice forms the words, "I cannot afford that." You catch it before it sets, and you let the wealthy voice respond, "That is easily handled," and you move on without the little death that sentence usually causes. In the afternoon, the wish for the larger life rises, and right behind it the demon, "How? Where will it come from? What is the plan?" You release it. You assume the end and let the how belong to the power that engineers it, and you feel the relief of putting down a weight you were never meant to carry. And at night, in the doorway of sleep, you do not replay the day's lack. You assume the end one more time calmly, deciding rather than begging, and you fall asleep as the person who already has it. That is one day. 7 moves, woven through ordinary hours. String enough of those days together, and the identity hardens into fact, and the outer world, which is only ever your assumption pushed out, has no choice but to rearrange itself to match the person you have quietly become. There is one more thing I have to warn you about, because it is the place where people who understand all of this still fail. It is the moment in between. The stretch of time after you have started making the moves, but before the world has shown you any proof. This is the valley, and it is where almost everyone turns back. They make the 7 moves for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and because the bank balance has not yet rearranged itself, they decide it is not working, and they walk back into the reversed moves, the working toward, the kneeling, the begging, the collapsing, and in doing so they abort the very thing that was forming underground. You have to understand what the silence is. The silence is not failure. The silence is the time the law needs to move people and open doors and build the bridge of incidents that you cannot see from where you stand. When a farmer plants, the field looks dead for a long time. If he digs up the seed every few days to check on it, he kills it. Your assumption is the seed, and the part of you that checks the balance hoping for instant proof is the hand that keeps digging it up. The 7th move, staying unmoved, is not just for the moment a bill arrives. It is for the long quiet stretch when nothing seems to be happening, when the only thing holding the new self together is your refusal to abandon it. The people who win with this law are not the ones who feel it most intensely. They are the ones who keep making the moves through the silence, with the calm faith of someone who planted good seed and simply expects the harvest on a timeline that is not his to set. And let me give you the measure that will keep you sane in that valley, because if you only measure by your balance, you will quit before it turns. The real measure of progress is not the money, it is how little the lack can move you. In the beginning, bad financial news drops you to the floor instantly. As the 7 moves take root, you will notice the same news comes and you feel the tug, but you do not fall. Later, the same news comes and you barely register it because it no longer matches who you know yourself to be, and your mind quietly discards it as irrelevant. That growing immunity is not nothing. That is the harvest beginning on the inside before it ever shows up on the outside. Watch your reactions, not your balance. The day a low number can no longer scare you is the day the low number has already lost, because you have become someone it can no longer describe. So when you are in the valley wondering if any of this is working, do not look at the bank. Look at how steady you stayed the last time reality tested you. That steadiness is the wealth, arriving first where it always arrives first, which is in the man before it reaches his world. Before you go, I want this to stick. So tell me in the comments which of the 7 moves caught you the hardest and what you are choosing to do instead, written as if you have already begun. Not I will try, but I have stopped asking and I have started deciding. Say it as the person who has already made the move, because the moment you declare it that way, you make it harder to slide back. And stay close to this channel, because I am going to keep handing you the inner mechanics of this, move by move, layer by layer, until being the wealthy self is no longer something you do and is simply who you are. I was wrong about the law of assumption once, and correcting it changed everything. Now you have the 7 moves the rich make without thinking, and the broke make in reverse. Stop making them backward, make them forward, and let your world rearrange itself around the person you have decided to become.